And that requires getting into a very uncomfortable spot all the time. The goal is failure.
I am joined on the UK Drum Show official podcast by Thomas Lang. Yeah.
Hello. Hello. Thanks, Ollie, for having me.
You're welcome. See you later. No, I'm joking, of course. Thank you. Uh, Thank you for coming on UK Drum Show official podcast. Um, you're opening the UK Drum Show 2025. You have got that job. It's not much
Wow.
pressure, is it?
Um, I wasn't aware of that. So yeah, that's gonna be fun because you know what? I like to be on early because then I can watch everybody else jam. I don't like to play after other people have played.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Why is that? Does it like make you nervous
Uh,
or not?
no, not at all. It's if I hear a lot of drumming before I have to drum it myself, my brain gets diluted with a lot of information that I find quite distracting.
Oh,
And
wow.
often kind of like a bit of a turnoff. You know, I don't
Okay.
have the drum boner if I listen to drums for hours before I have to play. You know what I
Okay.
mean? It's a thing. I don't know. I try to avoid listening to other people before I have to play. After, great, no problem.
Mhm.
But I absorb other people's drumming very intensely when I listen to it. And then my brain's just full of all this information. And I find it dilutes from my own kind of vibe a little bit. If I listen to a lot of like cliches, you
Yes.
know, it's like, yeah, and it's a bit of a turn off.
Yes, I
So I'm
understand.
happy. Thanks for that information. It makes me feel good.
Just
I also have to leave really early because I have a show in Poland the next day. So it's
oh,
probably also a good idea to go on early.
okay, okay. Well,
Maybe
he's
that's
going to
why
be
they
a
arranged it.
I would imagine so. Um, and after all these years, Thomas, it's fair to say that you're still on top of your game. You're still one of the best living drummers on the planet at the moment. What still excites you about walking onto a stage like that? A drum exhibition, a drum clinic, and bearing in mind the UK Drum Show and the Europe Drum Show now are the two biggest drum exhibitions and clinics in the world.
Really? Are they?
Yes.
Wow. Um, well, what still kind of turns me on is, I still enjoy playing, and especially drum shows. They're not, that's a very rare thing, really, in my day job. You don't get to play just solo drums and solo performances that much. Uh, Even although it may seem like I do a lot of these things, it is still sort of a rare thing for me to do. So I enjoy, first of all, that whole scenario of being able to just do whatever the heck I want to do, and fully nerd out on the drum set and show some maybe more innovative ideas and more modern approaches to playing and share that flavor, at a show like that. I enjoy that. I think my playing's still quite different from other people's playing, and I enjoy just doing my little shtick and sharing my ideas with an audience that's very attentive and like-minded, hopefully, uh, and able to absorb a lot of that information, understanding what I'm doing. That's always enjoyable. And I love to, entertain at that level. Um, it's fun. Um, you don't always get to go nuts, in such a niche way. You know what I
Yes.
mean? I
But you
mean, we're such
can.
a,
You can at this show.
but yes, you can. And of course, I want to take every opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
So I'm always looking forward to these things because in my day job, I don't really have that opportunity at all. Most of the time, what I play is very disciplined and And yes, very cliche because that's sort of what's demanded in our everyday work. So I just really enjoy stretching a little bit and also hopefully inspiring
Mm.
others, with that. And just showing what the potential is a little bit and where we could potentially go in our playing and the developing of the instrument. Just giving people ideas and hopefully inspiring and motivating people to sit down and try something creative themselves.
You're one of those drummers that I feel like I have to be ready to see Thomas Lang when I'm scrolling through Instagram and Facebook, because one minute I can see you play something and I think, oh my God, like I've got to try that. And then some days I'll look at your footage or what you're putting out there and I just get my drumsticks and I go, no, I'm just never going to be able to do that. It's not. It's not going to happen
Really?
because, well, your limb independence is like. I don't know any drummer that can do what you do, especially with such precision and such control. I feel like you're about nine people in one. If there was ever going to be a human octopus on the drums, I genuinely think it would be you. Um,
Well,
ob- Obviously known for your that kind of ridiculous independence, if you like. What's kind of one seemingly basic thing that you think a lot of drummers perhaps still overlook today, whether that be their practice regime or something they might overlook in the studio? What is something that you've noticed within other players, perhaps,
well,
or even in
one
yourself?
thing, yeah, one thing that comes to mind is just the ability to keep time with their left foot while they're doing stuff on the kit,
Mm,
whether it's in a basic groove context or while they're soloing. Um, just the ability to keep time with one limb with the left foot on the hi-hat, in quarter notes or eighth notes or something like that. That's a totally lost art. And I find that very sad to see. I see a lot of young students who started playing the drums using a double pedal right away and completely neglecting sort of the timekeeping component when they're soloing, between hands and right foot and doing like linear stuff, whatever it is on the
mm,
kit, and not being able to anchor that to a pulse. Um,
right.
that's really a big thing. That seems to be a totally lost art. I find that very sad and disappointing. Um, and that's the whole thing. If you can do that, everything you do is anchored to a pulse and has a very different meaning. Um, and if you put everything you play between hands and right foot into context, I think it elevates it to a much higher level. And it shows a much more profound command of the instrument, understanding of subdivisions, um, display of timekeeping ability,
Mhm.
precision. Everything's anchored to a pulse and therefore a specific subdivision,
Mm.
and it shows just a lot more control.
Yeah.
And I really love that and enjoy that very much. And a lot of what I do is based on that idea, even if my left foot sort of timekeeping patterns are maybe more complex.
Just a
But
bit.
yeah, maybe a bit. But they're based on that whole idea of just keeping time with one limb while you're doing other stuff with other limbs.
Mm.
And that's the biggest thing I think right now that I
Okay.
miss and I think is undervalued by a lot of younger players, and
Right.
that I think we should resurrect as one of the most important things to be able to do.
Absolutely. And do you think the introduction of the double pedal within, perhaps, as you say, younger drummers, do you think that's kind of a negative because you are, as you say, neglecting your left foot from the hats, or, you know,
I'm a big proponent and fan of double pedals and two bass drums. I love it.
Mhm.
I think everybody should play drums with both hands and both feet.
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely essential in today's world of drumming to have double bass chops and
Mhm.
a left foot that's just as developed as your right foot.
Mhm.
However, it's really important not to neglect the hi-hat and any other sort of pedal operated instruments with the left foot. I think that's really important, and it shows that you actually have good foot technique in general, like foot technique,
Yes.
not just double bass drum technique. A
Mm,
foot technique is really important to me, and there's so much potential for exploration and creativity and innovation in that world, more than I think any other aspect of drumming today.
hmm
So I don't think it's a problem or an issue that the young drummers start playing double bass drums early on or right away. I think that's cool. I recommend it. However, in addition to that, they should spend more time with the left foot on the hi-hat and really develop that, and not just
mm,
timekeeping skills with the left, but also maybe playing some more complex patterns on the hi-hat, you
mm.
know, offbeats or eighth note offbeats, eighth notes, 60 note offbeats, like simple stuff, or
Mm.
just kind of samba pattern or something like
Yes.
that,
Yes.
or a splashy hi-hat, whatever, just to be able to put everything else you're doing in context and anchor it to time. I think that
I like that. Yeah,
is
I totally, yeah, I completely get that. Thomas, talking about obviously, going back to the beginning, really of drumming with, having one foot on your hi hat, one foot on your kick drum. You have played with legends, taught globally, inspired millions of players. But when was the last time you felt like a beginner sitting behind the kit? Maybe when something personally impacted your playing, or maybe you'd had a experience where you thought, I just can't get that chop right. When can you tell us about, because when we see your footage, you are so precise and clean and everything's very complicated, but there obviously is a lot of work that goes behind that. And I wonder if you may be able to share a story as to when maybe you had a bit of a struggle recently.
I strive for that experience every time I sit down to practice. I try to literally confront all the things I cannot do every time I sit down and practice, and I feel like a beginner almost every time I
Do
sit
you
down to
really?
practice. Yeah, and
Wow.
that's the point of practicing for me. I want to push myself beyond my current capability, and that requires getting into a very uncomfortable spot all the time. The goal is failure for me every time I sit down to practice.
That's such a strange but also amazing way of looking at that. I feel like I've just had some sort of paradox in my head. It's like that's so clever.
Well, that is the point of practicing. The point of practicing versus playing is to confront your biggest weaknesses all the time and to eliminate problems and shine a light on the dark areas of your playing.
Mm.
I only dabble in that when I practice. So it's literally every day that I have that experience when I sit down to seriously practice. When I sit down to play, it's a very different thing,
Yes. Yeah.
Practicing is is confronting your demons on a daily basis. All the things you cannot do. You're learning something new, you're tweaking, refining, improving. That's what practicing is. You're dealing with all the stuff you can't do. It's frustrating. There's no, okay, the occasional epiphany or very slow progress, but to answer your question, I feel like that every day when I sit down to practice. I start at a point where I'm failing, and the goal is failure, and I try to develop things beyond that point, so it's literally every time I sit down to practice. And then when I just sit down to play, it's a very different attitude, because I then apply all the things that I've practiced, and I try to play them in context, and it's not introverted, it's extroverted, and it's not mechanical and repetitive and ultra rational and analytical. It's the opposite. It's creative. It's about emotion, about interaction. It's non-repetitive.
Yes.
And I try to apply into things, and I improvise, and it's about energy and nuance and dynamics and all that. But when I'm practicing, it's really lame. And I feel like a
Right.
beginner every day. And that's what I'm going for. I'm going for
That,
that experience.
That's incredibly inspiring to hear, especially coming from you. That's amazing that you have that outlook, and I hope that itself inspires so many people that are listening or watching this. You used the word extroverted there, and I want to just pick up on that. Why do you think it is, Thomas, that drummers within a band situation are the natural extrovert? Why are drummers 9 times out of 10 the party animals of the band? Or why do you feel that drummers can go to an event like the UK Drum Show or Europe Drum Show, and after just one weekend, they can make new best friends for life from just a love of drums? Because you don't see that with many other instruments.
I think several factors. One is the fact that drumming is such a primal activity. It's so simple and easy to understand and to visually absorb and understand what the drummer is doing. Even a non-drummer can watch a drummer grab a stick and bash something. I mean, it's like the most direct, most basic sort of thing to absorb as a listener. You know, if you see somebody play the piano, first of all, you don't visually connect much with the
Hmm.
activity. You know, you don't know exactly which keys he's pressing. It's all very complex. There's harmonies and there's like tensions uh and it's very, as much as I love the piano, I play piano myself, but it's not as visually exciting, first of all, and
Hmm.
it's very difficult for people to identify with the activity themselves because it requires a lot more theory, and the scale is so much smaller of the physical aspect of it. It's hard
Yes.
to kind of absorb it visually. With the drums, you see somebody go boom, 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 and everybody identifies with that, Uh, and I think that's
Yes.
one reason why the drummers they bank on that when they perform, and that
Mm,
makes the party animal. We can use that to become more attractive on stage. We can really sort of drive it home with big movements and make everybody see exactly what we're doing. And it's easy to impress somebody if you're wailing and headbanging at the same time. Everybody's like, oh, I know exactly what he's doing. He's bashing that thing, and then he's bashing that thing, and then those two
yes.
things really fast, and it's very comprehensive, the performance and the playing and the simple physical activity of it. And because why do drummers become best friends immediately? It's also, I think, very simple. It's because anybody who does what we do and uh, acquires a high level of skill um, is automatically, I think, understood by fellow drummers. We
Hmm.
all know what it takes to get there. We all have respect for somebody's achievements on the instrument because we know exactly how difficult it is, how hard it is, how much work it is, how much discipline it requires. And I think we can identify with each other very, very much. And the fact that there is no ego involved, like with other instruments,
Yeah.
um, is because of the nature of the activity, I think. When a guitar is an amplified instrument, usually you go, through a whole bunch of effect boxes and amp settings and all kinds of stuff to get
Mm.
your sound, and and
Yeah.
and you know, it's easy to fake certain things or to make things sound more complex than they are using effects and delays and all
Mhm.
kinds of digital processing. On the drums, on an acoustic drum set, there is none of that. It's a
No.
piece of wood and a drum head, and
Mhm.
everything happens there. So it's all about the hands and the
Yes.
feet and the very simple physical, uh, you know, aspects of it. And if I see another drummer and I see somebody play really well, I'm like, wow, it took so much to
Yes.
get there. And without any ego, I can just would happily say like, dude, that was amazing, you
Yes.
know? And and the thing is also we share like this is how you do it. This is how you do that. This is how you do that. And we are so open and happy to share exactly the details and nuance of what we're doing because we all know how hard it is to get there. You have to put in the work. You can have
Mm.
all the information. Here it is. Boom, take it home now, do the work. And I think that makes a big difference. We can't fake anything on the drums. It's so direct, and so simple to understand in many ways, like in terms of movement and motions and mechanics and so on, that the one thing that separates the boys from the men here is actually putting in the work.
Yeah.
So everybody who's sounds great and is a great player has put in the work, and everybody has respect for that. There's no reason to hide anything
Hmm.
or like withhold information like many guitar players do, like what their settings are and what they're doing
Yeah.
exactly. They're like, no, this is my thing. I'm not sharing that. Need that. We don't need that at all. And I think that makes the drumming community very special. Everybody
Mm.
goes, well, you know what? He put in the work. Respect.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
tip my hat to you, sir.
I love
Um,
it.
and and everything else is just like, of course, there's personality and like specific ideas and creativity and all that, but that's all very sort of attached to the individual. And we
Mm.
have respect for that too, for their individual approach and maybe their ideas or creative interpretations of things that already exist.
Mm.
But at the end of the day, you just got to put in the work.
Yeah.
If you don't put in the work, it's like, okay, well, you don't sound great. Carry on, but if somebody put in the work, you have to have respect for that. And as you know, in the world of drumming, there's no room for ego, you
No.
know. It's
No.
yeah, you just got to put in the work, and then
That's
there'll be a lot of love from fellow drummers.
100%, 100%. And one place you're going to feel a lot of love, Thomas, is the UK Drum Show between the weekend of the 18th and 19th of October. We are so excited not only to have you, but to be opening the entire weekend. My last question for you on
Yes.
the UK Drum Show official podcast is what are you going to be bringing to the table that perhaps other drummers of that main stage might not? For example, on last year's UK Drum Show podcast, Nick Collins said he was going to make his session interactive. Chris Coleman said it would be a miracle if he just turned up. So, what for you? What for you is going to be the kind of the stamp of Thomas Lang that you're going to leave on that stage and leave everybody inspired with after you've finished?
Well, I will bring definitely a pedal setup that nobody else is bringing to the show.
I bet you bloody are actually.
Yeah, I'll bring a really cool looking drum set with a lot of toys, and I will bring some, 21st century high-end drumming
You
with,
absolutely love it, don't you? You absolutely bloody love it, don't you? You like your
of
pedal
course.
setups, your toys. It's just,
Oh,
it's
yeah,
just.
I'll have very small drums and I have very big drums. I have octoban type rototoms and I have gong drums. I'll bring all my foot toys and some very interesting sounding um, elements and instruments in my drum set that are probably not like anybody else's drum kit. And I will, strive to display some high-end 21st century drumming and hopefully inspire people and leave my mark that way. I'm also really looking forward to just going back to the UK because I lived there, as you probably know, for many years. I lived in London for like 15 years. So it's the first time I'm going back in a long time. And I'm really looking forward to that, visiting my old home and breathing of some of that beautiful British air, probably what is it, October? Yeah, October, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
it's gonna be cold and
it
rainy
will
and
be.
fog and
It'll be horrible outside, but amazing inside.
yeah, but I'm looking forward to that. I'm just looking forward to coming back to the UK and hopefully my goal is to just make people go, huh, that was interesting.
Yeah.
You know, that's it. If I can do that, then I'm very happy. Just sort of try to inspire, inform, and entertain.
Thomas, we cannot wait to see you bring all your toys to the stage and all your wisdom, and to leave thousands of people inspired by your playing. Thank you so much for coming on the UK Drum Show official podcast, and we will see you very, very soon.
Thank you, Ollie. I'm looking forward to it.